Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us and welcome to the DermPath Fellowship Forum. I'm Dr. Emma Johnson. I'm a dermatologist and dermatopathologist at Mayo Clinic in Rochester. And we have a great forum, a set of panelists, and some discussion to go over the basics of what fellowship is, what we as training directors look for in applicants, how to best prepare yourself, and how to get the most out of fellowship. So pretty comprehensive. I will let the other panelists introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Trisha Miskell. I am also a dermatologist and dermatopathologist and the fellowship director at the University of Florida in Gainesville.
Do we have Ahmed?
Yeah, so I wasn't really sure what the order was, but my name is Ahmed Al-Omari. I'm a dermatopathologist and a pathologist at Indiana University. This is my 11th year out of fellowship, uh, and look forward to this webinar, and hopefully it will be helpful to everyone.
All right. I am Nicole Burkemper. I am a dermatologist, dermatopathologist at SSM Health, St. Louis University School of Medicine. I'm the current DermPath Fellowship Director there, and I am the Vice Chair of the ASDP Training Directors Committee.
Hi, I'm Mithul Modi. I'm a pathologist and dermatopathologist at Rush University Medical Center in Chicago, and I'm 3 years out of fellowship and look forward to the great forum and answering the questions.
And I'm Jolie Potts. I actually just finished DermPath Fellowship at the University of Florida, and I am starting as an attending and clinical assistant professor at the University of Florida on Monday. So I'm in the twilight zone between fellowship and attendinghood. And I'm dermatology trained.
Excellent. Thank you all for being here tonight and offering your wisdom. We are going to start this forum by just reviewing the brand new match cycle timeline and fellowship CAS. We will review that because it is brand new this year, and then we'll get into the questions for our panelists. So I'll let Nicole, who has been instrumental in the passage of this or the implementation of the fellowship CAS and the mass or the match, review the timeline.
Okay, great. Thanks, Emma. Yeah, it's been a long time coming, and hopefully applicants will see this as a definite benefit to them where, it's not just like the Wild West trying to figure out, when you need to apply the rolling admission situation. We're completely doing away with that this year and hoping that it is a success and that applicants feel very much more supported in the entire process. And we would love to have feedback along the way and definitely at the end of the process. For those of you that haven't visited the ASDP website lately, you definitely should do that. The fellowship page is changing pretty much constantly. We keep updating that website and that page with information as we are getting it regarding the match and fellowships CAS. I will say it's actually fellowships CAS. There's an S in between. It's plural instead of singular, in case you start looking for this on the internet to register. So you'll need to, of course, have it spelled correctly. So the timeline is on the website. The timeline on the website is a lot more busy because it also is including some dates related to what programs need to do to get up and running to have their program listed on Fellowships CAS. So you can kind of disregard a lot of the stuff that's kind of above the month timeline and just focus on the things that are currently presented in front of you on this slide. So you can see the fellowship forum is listed here. The next date that you all should know about is the October 1st date when Fellowships Cast, that is the centralized application system or service, opens for applicants to start uploading and entering in their materials. That does not mean that that is the date when programs are going to be retrieving those applications. It is the earliest date that they could retrieve those applications, and depending on how programs like to do things, if they like to grab those applications as soon as they come in, or they kind of wait, and batch them together. That isn't something that we're dictating at this point. Programs can do that however they want. I would definitely recommend that you get into Fellowships Cast. It's really easy. Just Google it, create an account, and then it'll walk you through the entire process of how to apply. There are other programs that are on Fellowships Cast. So when you are selecting your fellowships, you can choose dermatopathology. I would guess many of you, that's the only one you're going to pick. For some of you that are pathology trained, perhaps one of the other pathology fellowships that you might be applying to would be on there as well. More and more fellowships are joining all the time. But you would have to choose dermatopathology, and then you'll be able to see all of the programs that are participating in Fellowships Cast. It is not required for programs to participate. We do anticipate that most programs will choose to use this service, because this way, it's a streamlined way for applicants to apply to multiple programs. And if someone is going outside of that and still requiring, emailing the individual components of an application, I think applicants, may not be as likely to kind of go through those extra steps. We're not saying that you shouldn't do that. If you're interested in a program that's not participating, by all means, do that. But that's the reason we anticipate most programs will be up and running on Fellowships Cast. So during the months of October, November, December, and half of January, you'll be able to submit your applications to the different programs. Once you enter your information into Fellowships Cast, all you have to do is click the buttons of the programs you want to send that stuff to. You don't have to contact the programs individually. They will get notification that you've applied to their program. So it's really nice that, it's very similar to ERIS and other similar systems where it's very streamlined for the applicant, where you just have to enter your materials in once. That includes, your experiences, your research activities, your medical school information, your USMLE scores, your letters of recommendation, your personal statements. It's really all in that centralized location. We, as a dermatopathology specialty, have chosen January 15th as kind of the date that the application portal will close. I will say that technically it will still be open, so you could still enter your information, but after January 15th, there's no guarantee that a program is going to actually retrieve your information. So you definitely want to get things in there before January 15th. And I would encourage you to get it in there, before January 15th, not to wait till the very last minute, although it will be open until then. If you go to the ASDP website, you'll also be able to see a list of programs and when they are planning to officially kind of close their window for applications and what months they're planning to interview. So if you're, kind of interested in that information, you can go, and you definitely should look to see if a program is saying that they are going to not look at applications at an earlier date than January 15th. If they say, you know what, we want to do our interviews in January, so we're not going to look at applications after December 15th, that's their prerogative. So if it behooves you to go in there and kind of look at those individual dates before you submit an application too late for a program you're interested in. February 3rd, the NRMP match opens. The match is a completely separate system than the Fellowships Cast. Fellowships Cast is just helping us to get the application materials, whereas the match, you guys are all used to the match for residencies and things. So you kind of understand that you'll register for the match separately from doing the Fellowships Cast portal. Ranking opens March 10th, April 14th. Rank order lists are due, and then match day is April 28th, 2027. Remember, this will not be a start date for fellowship until July of 28. So overall, the timeline, although it's a little bit later than it used to be in the past, which I think is wonderful for applicants, they can have even a little bit more time to decide if they really want to do a dermatopathology fellowship. It's still going to be essentially an entire year and a little more before you would start your fellowship training. So sorry, I talked a lot, but I do think, this is new information to a lot of people out there, and we want to make sure that you're, hitting those dates and those different systems that you're going to need to interact with.
Thank you very much for that nice summary. Here's another key dates, as Dr. Burkemper was saying. October 1st, fellowships CAS opens, and most of the deadlines are around January 15th. I think most programs are expecting to interview between January and March, and then match day is in late April. Which, as Dr. Becker-Kember was saying, is about like 6 to 8 months delayed from our previous sort of cycles. And I just want to echo Dr. Burkember directing everyone to the ASDP website. You had to go there to register, but this has all the information you need to know about DermPath Fellowship training programs. And like she said, it is updated almost daily. And Karen Zader, who's on the call right now, is our ASDP liaison, and she is wonderful and updates this as soon as any of our program directors have any changes. So that is a great overview of what's to come. I will stop sharing and we can ask our panelists some questions. I think there is a Q&A. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat. We have a list of questions that we'll go through first, and then if we see some trends within the chat, we'll certainly do that. So our first question to pose to the group is, how long are DermPath fellowships generally? And if there is variation, what accounts for this variation? And just jump in, panelists.
I feel like I talked enough, so.
I can jump in on that one. So DermPath fellowships are usually 1 year long fellowships. That's what is required in terms of clinical training. There are a few programs in the country that offer a second year of research. There are not all of these programs, just a few of them. If you are interested in a kind of a researcher or a clinician scientist type of job in the future, that might be something you want to consider. I have to say that most of these programs probably will require you to apply for a grant as you are coming to the fellowship, so that you can secure some of the funds for part of the research that you'll be doing, and so on. But what is required is mainly 1 year of fellowship clinical training for most programs.
Thank you.
That was an easy question for me.
Yes. What are the main requirements that the fellows must fulfill throughout the year? And is it different between derm and path trained people?
So for path, yeah, it is a little bit different. So it's 12 years of clinical work. You have to spend 8 months where you spend half day in the other specialties. So if you are from a path background, you have to spend half a day for 8 months in clinics. And if you're derm trained, you have to spend half a day for 8 months in the different subspecialties of pathology. The actual numbers that you have to accumulate decreased for a few years ago. So it used to be 1,000 patients that you had to see if you're path trained. Now it's only 500. The idea is to try to focus on quality rather than quantity. Try to see kind of complex patients. Try to see if can understand some consult cases, some kind of inpatients, not just kind of focusing on the simple kind of AK or SK or kind of skin cancer screening patients, but try to kind of dive into some of the more complex patients, try to understand some of the complexity in understanding the presentation and the treatment plans for some of these patients. The same for derm trained fellows. It used to be that you had to have 1,000 surgical pathology specimens and 200 cytopathology specimens. It now is only 500 total specimens that you have to see. And again, the idea is to try to focus on high yield things, things that you will be, if you have a bone and soft tissue service, for example, in your institution, that will be a great place to spend some time in. A heme path service, that's another great place to spend some time in. GYN, another good one. But there might be not so much relevant. I mean, it's good to spend some time with all of them just to have an idea about what's every subspecialty is, but maybe try to kind of spend more quality time with some of these subspecialties.
Any additions from our recent grads?
I guess I'll just say that you're required in the dermatopathology part to see 5,000 specimens. That's all that's required for a program to exist as a dermatopathology fellowship. So just keep that in mind. I think a lot of us have way more cases than that, but that is the minimum requirement for the dermatopathology specimens.
Are fellows generally involved in teaching during their fellowship year?
I can take on that. I think the fellows are definitely involved in the teaching. I think at the scope and also at the lecture wise as well. For example, what I did during my fellowship is I used to teach dermatology and pathology residents almost every other week in the didactic sessions, and we go through the chapter wise for the dermatopathology. And on the scope, on the scope, you go through the cases as well with the timeline and what the time you have. So I think teaching is an important part of the fellowship. I think it makes me a better dermatopathologist when I'm teaching. So I think that's an essential part. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I agree.
actually an ACGME requirement. It specifically states that dermatopathology fellows will teach dermatology and or pathology residents. And you're often teaching medical students too. I'll just say that. And usually other, physicians, even attendings, especially in those like multidisciplinary sessions. So, yeah, there's a lot of teaching and a lot of learning.
I agree. I think it varies kind of widely by institution what the expectations are for the fellow. There's definitely a lot of like day-to-day teaching with dermatology and path residents, and then I think a lot of programs will have you do weekly or bi-weekly didactic sessions as well. I agree with Dr. Modi that you definitely get a lot out of teaching. I think that was a huge enrichment to my fellowship, so definitely something to take advantage of.
And how about research? How much research opportunities or requirements are there?
The only actually, I'll just quote the ACGME. The only actual like requirement is that you have to either submit a publication, a scholarly work for publication, or present at a meeting. It doesn't quality, it doesn't say it has to be this type of meeting or this type of publication. I don't even think it says peer reviewed, but I mean, we kind of all expect that to be the case in an academic publication. And I think programs vary by the type and the amount of research that's required. Because, of course, you can submit a case report as a publication or a presentation, so that would technically count for ACGME requirements. But I know at our program we require the fellow to do a true, research IRB project throughout the year. But I don't know that that's a standard requirement.
Yeah, I think research is one of these things that are definitely self-driven in terms of how much you really want to do in terms of research. There are always a lot of opportunities to do it. Uh, but I have to say that the fellowship is a very busy year. Regardless of what background you're coming from, it's going to be an extremely busy year. You're going to have to learn a lot of things. So if you have that self-motivation, I'm pretty sure you're going to go to a program where they can offer you all the resources that to do great research and build a research career for after fellowship. Uh, but as Nicole mentioned, I mean, in terms of what's required, the same thing. I mean, we just require them to work on one project, submit that to a meeting to present it as an oral or as a poster presentation, and then take that project and get it to a finish line by the end of the fellowship. So we just request that it would be submitted as a manuscript by the end of the fellowship. Sometimes it doesn't get accepted. Sometimes it does get accepted. But that's kind of what we require from them. But I always open it early on to all fellows at the beginning of the year is that this is something you can go as far as you want with it, and you can invest as much time as you want into this.
That's the same thing I tell my fellows. I sort of tell them to look at the year as the year to learn derm path and get very competent at that, and then research beyond the one required academic project is sort of self-motivated, self-driven, and then beyond. Also to look beyond the fellowship. So if they're going into academics, we want to obviously foster a whatever their niche will be in the future. So if you come into fellowship knowing, oh, I want to do academics, I want to do private practice, I want to focus on XYZ, we're all ready and able and willing to help our fellows succeed. I think we can move on to the next sort of block of questions, which is the application process and what interviews are like. And the first question I have is, what are the components of a typical application?
All right. Do you want me to go ahead and share the screen from Fellowships Cast? Because this is going to look a bit different this year because we are using this new system. And Emma, if you could let me know when it's showing.
It is showing.
Okay, great. So this is kind of a playground environment. So I've created an application for myself. I am not planning to apply again for a dermatology fellowship, but that's the way I could get into this to show you all today. And I'll kind of go through these different sections. When we started this process, and by we, I mean Jane Messina, who's the chair of the ASDP Training Directors Committee, and myself as the vice chair of that committee. When we started talking to Fellowships Cast, we took the standardized application for dermatopathology that already existed for programs to use if they so chose, and basically recapitulated those different components into Fellowships Cast. We did make some tweaks just because one of the reasons that we as a specialty have decided to go down this path is because this is going to allow us to get data to provide to future potential applicants to let them know, what is a competitive applicant or things like that. So there were a few tweaks, but in general, it was kept very similar to the written application. So under the personal information, I think this is pretty standard. Your generic information. Other information, things that are listed here are going to be if you're a member of the military, if you have an active license, if any disciplinary actions have been taken against you, and if you're board certified. So that's that other information. I think this is very self-explanatory with academic history, prior training, and scores. Supporting information, also very similar to ARIS. For experiences, you're allowed to list up to 12. There is no such thing that, you have to list like the 3 most impactful ones or anything like that, at least not at this point. The personal statement kind of speaks for itself. It's 4,000 characters maximum. Publications and presentations are limited to 45 each. Honor societies, they ask you if you're allopathic or osteopathic trained, and then if you're allopathic, they ask if you're AOA. If you're osteopathic, they ask if you're Sigma Sigma Phi, and then they ask about gold humanism. Honors and awards are just other honors and awards that you've received. And then the documents, these are things you have to actually upload because we do ask for the actual scores up here for USMLE, but we also like to see the written paper that confirms that you actually got that score. So the transcripts get uploaded, medical school diploma, your CV, and your headshot can get uploaded there. And then for recommendations, as a specialty, we're keeping our kind of letter of recommendation requirement the same with you're required to submit 3 letters, one of which needs to be from your program director. And then there's some wording related to, if your program director is no longer able to do that for whatever reason, then a letter from the chair. And the details, there's always like a little information bubble that you can click on if you need more information. So that's basically what you're going to need to enter in and then send to those individual programs.
And Nicole, there's lots of questions in the Q&A specifically about the application not being able to choose DermPath yet and confirming that that will start on October 1st.
That is correct. Yeah. The fellowships cast folks are so on top of it. They're so organized. Yeah, they don't want people, inadvertently submitting things before that October 1st date. So rest assured that will be an option. But definitely get in there, kind of see what it's all about. You can start putting things in, ahead of time if you're a real proactive type of person, but the DermPath programs, because I have to say the programs themselves, we just had a webinar on Monday about how to even get our information into fellowships cast. So you really have nothing to look at yet because those programs haven't been created. We're working on that over the next couple of weeks. Fellowships cast will get things in. Also, I will say, and I believe there's a link on the ASDP fellowships page. There is a help desk for a fellowships cast. So if you do, when you start putting in your information, you have any questions, they are so helpful and the team just works together so well. I can't imagine they wouldn't be like the best resource for you. So definitely use them if you need them. But yeah, October 1st is when you'll be able to see our DermPath programs. Was there any other questions in the chat related to fellowships cast or
Mostly about the October 1st deadlines or date that they'll be able to view because people are, as we speak, creating profiles in fellowships cast. So that's
awesome.
wonderful.
I'm excited. Yeah. Hopefully everybody on the Zoom is excited that, this process is now, going to be much more streamlined.
Absolutely. And we know that there's 3 letters, one of which should come from your program director. Who else should letters of recommendation necessarily come from?
I'll let somebody else field that call because that's outside of the purview of the fellowships cast.
I think it's good to have attending physicians that you've worked with really closely during your time in residency that know you well and can speak to your strengths and can maybe like talk about you in ways other than in ways that are different than your program director can. But basically, I think that somebody that knows you well and that can speak to all the ways that you would be an asset to a DermPath program would be good choices to write your letters.
I agree. When I am reviewing letters, I do recognize some names of letter writers, but not all. And big names do not necessarily outweigh other names. Just the level of the knowledge about the applicant is really speaks for itself. And it does help if you're on the derm side, if it can be from someone that you've actually sat and read out with, because that we spend so much time sitting next to each other at the scope or at the computer reading out. And so knowing that that sort of vibe is going to go well is helpful as a program director.
Yeah, and just one thing, I'm not sure how many derm trained folks on the call know that dermatology is going towards a standardized letter of recommendation through ARIS for dermatology residency application. Dermatopathology does not have a standardized letter at this point. So your letter writers, can just write their narrative letter as usual.
And they'll be able to upload it in. So, will there be like a link that you send your letter writer, or how do those get confidentially uploaded in Fellowships CAS?
Correct. There's a
Okay.
way that they will, the applicant will enter in their letter writer's email, and then Fellowships Cast will be contacting the letter writer via email, and then that will get uploaded, as you said, confidentially. So the programs will be able to see it, but the applicant will not. Definitely give your letter writer a heads up before you put their information in there. I definitely would recommend that so it's not like a shock when they get this email and they have no idea what it is and they just delete it because they didn't know they were supposed to write you a letter. There will be like some prompts too. Like you'll be able
So,
to see, even though you're not able to see the letter, you'll be able to know if your letter writer uploaded your letter. So there is a checks and balances where you can know, and so you can bug somebody that hasn't uploaded their letter, but not, bother somebody that has already done theirs.
one other thing to add about letters, I think I've noticed that more from uh, derm trained applicants is frequently I get these co-signed letters, so letters wrote by more than one person. I've not seen that really with path trained applicants. Uh, Not sure why, but I think it would be if you felt that you worked with two great attendings, but not for an extended period of time, and you think both might write or contribute some good things to your letter, maybe that's something to ask them to do for you. Just co-write a letter for you, so that way it's a stronger one, captures, especially like if you did an elective at a different institution and you spent like 1 week with uh, three attendings or two attendings, it might be a good idea to just ask them to co-write you one, so that will be a stronger one that captures the whole experience that you've had there. So definitely consider that one that option if you've done something similar to that.
Yeah, I think you'll have to send the request to write the letter to just one of the authors. And then they'll have to, kind of put the two together and send it through that one name.
And then how can the applicants make their application stand out in a good
I would
way?
think the personal statement is, really important to make an applicant stand out. You want to have, a good quote unquote story, like your story. And you want to speak to why you are interested in dermatopathology, what traits make you maybe unique or would make you an outstanding fellow and dermatopathologist. I think when you have a really cohesive story that really ties together and it makes sense, that kind of speaks to me. I also think follow through. I think Ahmed mentioned it, follow through on projects. He mentioned it with the fellows, but doing projects during residency where you don't just, dabble in a lot of different projects, but you actually have seen projects to completion, and you show that you're committed to something once you start it, because that's what you want in a fellow. I think you want to speak to all of those qualities that we want as a fellow, and I think that might be a future question, so I won't answer that right now. But just kind of think about maybe the fellows or even the attendings that you've worked with, and what are the qualities that you really, thought were meaningful, and then see how you might also show those qualities.
Maybe to add to that, and since we talked about the letters, sometimes I think our panelists already mentioned that strong letters, even from one of your strongest mentors, even not being a big name, could be one of the strong part of your application.
I
I do
agree.
have
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
do have one additional comment on the personal statement. I completely agree that telling a story that really captures your interest and what you can bring to the program is a great thing that a personal statement should convey to you. But I've sometimes feel and I've seen some personal statements that are very glorious and very uh, kind of very rosy in a way that sometimes might really raise some red flags. So, I mean, I think just being realistic and telling a real story, a realistic story that captures your interest, don't overdo it, don't overthink it to the point where it might not feel very authentic. So I think there's a very fine line between really telling your story and kind of losing that authenticity with a letter. So just be careful with that. I think a great advice with that is maybe have a friend or someone read it for you and see what they think about it. Someone who might know you a little bit and kind of read it and then think, yeah, I think really captures what I know about you and all that stuff. So it kind of really might give you some feedback into, oh, maybe you've overdone it in that direction or in this direction. So that might be something to consider is maybe try to be as authentic as possible. Have someone have a look at it. Someone who might know you will kind of give you some helpful feedback on that.
Yeah, I love that authentic recommendation.
And so at Mayo, we do virtual interviews, and I think that most programs are virtual at this point. So one of our questions are, how can people excel in a virtual setting?
I think practice, practice, not, I don't know, even a fake interview situation, but I'm sure that residents are doing virtual, conferences and stuff. Don't maybe be the wallflower that never speaks up. You want to get practice speaking into, the computer and conveying emotion, even though you're not face to face with somebody. And I don't mean emotion like starting to cry during your interview, but you know what I mean? Like you want to smile, you want to use the right facial expressions, and practicing with someone that's going to be honest with you about, did you come across as authentic, speaking of authentic, or did you seem really nervous, or did you, say a lot, or whatever. I think, as I just say uh just practice is good to kind of work on conveying that warmth that you might sometimes miss in a virtual interview setting.
I completely agree. And I always tell my residents who are applying to think about questions that they might be asked and then
Mhm.
come up with potential answers or examples, and have those front of mind, but don't have them listed on your computer screen. And because we can typically tell if you're reading off of
Yeah.
a prompt. Um, so practicing and finding examples of different situations that you might be asked about. The next question is, what kind of questions we ask our applicants? And I would say the one that sort of ties into what we've been talking about is, tell me about a time where you took a project from start to finish and sort of what hurdles you had to overcome and how you overcame those hurdles. So a lot of it is going to be assessing examples from your life that we find important to be qualities in our DermPath fellows. So taking projects to completion, attention to detail. Think about those qualities, and then we're going to ask you questions to demonstrate those qualities.
Yeah, I think it's similar to I advise I'm like the student advisor for the medical students going into dermatology, and I recommend that they kind of have like a little collection of anecdotes that show those different qualities that they might be asked about, and to pick maybe anecdotes that would potentially fit several of those qualities. So when you're asked, tell me about a time that you faced an obstacle and overcame it, you can just pull that story. And again, don't have it typed on your computer screen, but you can easily, get that out of your brain and then convey it and spin it in the way that's answering the question that they're asking. And you do want to answer the question, because when you just sort of coerce your answer, your story the way you want it to be, that is definitely a red flag when somebody doesn't answer the question. So make sure you're listening to the question and answering it in the best way possible.
Some questions that I remember getting asked on almost every interview that I went on were, what do you picture your career looking like? Where do you think you'll be in 5 to 10 years? What are you interested in specifically in dermatopathology? And questions about just like who you are outside of work, and like your hobbies and what you like to do in your free time. So just make sure you've kind of rehearsed and know what you're going to talk about when that comes up.
I think since you've also, like, you're currently a trainee, most, people that are applying to fellowship are residents. There's a lot of overlap in the qualities that we look for in residents and fellows.
Good.
I like to sometimes ask, what is a constructive criticism that you've gotten from your program director? So they may pull things from
Mm.
your current training that might speak to the type of trainee that you'll be in fellowship as well. So just think about some of those things that you might be um, evaluated on during residency. And I think that's just ripe for the picking for questions.
And to add to that, I think a couple of questions I feel that panelists were more interested in, getting the right answer is because applicant would be applying for multiple programs, so they also want to see the interest and how much you are interested in that specific program. So, why this program specifically, and at the same time, why you are a good fit for that program could also be helpful if you can prepare it.
Also, have questions ready. Most interviewers at the end of their interview are going to ask if you have any questions. So just that might be a time where you might want to have some written down, so that you don't ask the same question of all the interviewers. So you can, if you ask a question to one group of interviewers, you cross that one out and then you go down to the next one. Because, we of course meet after the interviews, and if it's like, oh, they asked the same question of each of the interviewers, it's kind of like, okay, they had nothing else to ask. So, um, but yeah, definitely have like, five or so questions ready.
And one of the
I know.
questions, oh,
Okay.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, one of the questions I asked, I know it's probably not a very popular question and not a very liked question, is what are your plans if you did not match? I mean, there's really no right or wrong answer to that. I mean, obviously, I want to make sure that you're really passionate about derm path and you really get into derm path. But there's nothing wrong in showing maturity in terms of kind of having a plan. I mean, it's not like, if I did not get into derm path this year, I may try again next year. I may kind of work on these things that I think might improve my CV and kind of maybe think about what you actually really want to do to improve your CV for next year and so on. And then maybe if things did not work out, showing maturity in that I can learn other things and I can evolve into other things and so on. I think these are really important things. Again, there's really no right or wrong answer. It's just capturing the passion and the maturity with that question is what I'm really looking for.
One of the questions in the chat is what kind of questions can we ask our interviewers during the interview? And I think things that I've received and thought were thoughtful questions are things like, how is your program going to change, or do you expect any major changes in the next 2 years? Um, Always asking the interviewer, or I personally enjoy this. It's like, why did you choose DermPath, or what makes DermPath at XYZ institution special, or what is a strength of your program that we might not know about? Um, so not just sort of about are teaching opportunities available, not just facts about the program, but sort of drawing out the program spirit from the interviews is helpful.
Yeah, as a program director, I always like it when they ask, "What are you most proud of about your fellowship?" So,
Now we know what questions to ask Dr. Burkemper.
yeah, right. I know. I've just like spilled my guts here.
Yeah, we're giving away all of our secrets.
Well,
Okay,
that is the benefit of signing up for this Q&A.
webinar.
So, yeah.
Exactly. The next sort of block of questions is perspectives on what, as program directors and recent graduates, what are the qualities we're really looking for and really make DermPath fellows and fellow applicants stand out. I would say what I really look for when I'm reviewing applications is a ability to focus on the details. DermPath is really, the devil is in the details, creating reports, writing reports, sharing your histopathologic diagnoses via writing is how we communicate our diagnoses. So I look for qualities that hone in on attention to detail and the sort of meticulous nature of what a fellow should and could be.
All right, I'm happy to chime in again. So, um, so the way that I kind of create my questions for interviews is actually to think about those qualities and then think of a way to ask a question that will bring out how much of that quality this applicant, demonstrates. So proactiveness is huge for me. Taking ownership of the cases is kind of how I see the proactiveness in a fellow. Communication, Emma alluded to that, but communication happens in so many ways in dermatopathology because we do have the communication with the staff, the lab staff, the office staff, the attending physicians, the residents, the other fellows, if there are fellows. So there's that verbal communication, there's written communication in emails and in reports and all those types of things. And then we add in an outside, clinician that also we need to speak to, whether it's in the written form or the verbal form. So communication and proactiveness are a couple of huge ones for me, and asking, interview questions that kind of relate to that.
One other thing that I think some of the questions I do ask that I try to again kind of look at the ability to communicate important information. So some of the questions I might ask is, tell me about some of the projects that you have done. Give me like an executive summary of what you've done. I mean, being able to have a good understanding of what you actually have done and be able to summarize that and give it in a brief, kind of summarize that briefly and be able to convey the main messages from a project that you maybe spent months working on. I think that's really important because it really would capture a lot of what you will be doing around the microscope, where you're communicating with that attending, and the attending might be asking you to kind of show a case to someone else or kind of get a consult from someone else and so on. Being able to kind of understand what you have been working on, being able to process that, communicate that effectively to someone else and in a summarized way, I think that's really important. So kind of be ready to being asked about like one of the projects that you worked on. I mean, summarize that to me. What did you find in that? What were the major findings? How did you enjoy working on that, and so on? So be prepared to have a couple of questions about things like that, about projects that you have done, or not just research. I mean, anything that you have listed in your CV about something that you try to highlight a lot in your CV, just be prepared to give some summaries and few statements about that, because that really will capture your understanding of what you've done and your ability to communicate that to someone else.
I agree with all those. I guess one thing I would add is I always like to ask the applicants about how they learn best and the environment they learn best in, because I think we all have different fellowships that are very unique in terms of the learning environment, and different fellows could thrive at different places. And so I always want them to be a good match for our program.
For the recent grads, how did you get the most out of your fellowship? What advice would you give to future fellows?
I think I'll just start on that. I think what I kept in mind when I was going into the fellowship is that after 1 year of this fellowship, I'll be signing out cases by my own. Every report will have my name. So try to see as many derm path cases as possible, even after business hours, even after from the boxes, try to see as many cases as possible. And also for path train, try to attend clinic, more clinic, try to take the notes, try to take the biopsy, because I think eventually it's a collaborative work. I think that is one thing that I always kept in mind, and taking ownership of the cases, as a fellow, not just looking at the cases with attending, but take the ownership, think it is your case, and think it you'll be signing out the case. So how can you make the most out of that? I think that helps a lot. So yeah.
Yeah, the year definitely goes very, very fast. So I think it's as on day one, to be able to take ownership as much as you can and to see as much as you can without like overwhelming yourself and still being able to do the work, I think is really, really important. But also to remember to take time for yourself too, because you're not going to be able to see a million cases without also like taking care of your personal well-being. Take lots of notes, save every email that your attending tells you, sends you, telling you the things that you missed or didn't get quite right, and just savor as much of it as you can because it goes by really, really fast.
I think those are very insightful. I think taking ownership of the case is just like a huge step in the right direction, following up on all of the recuts and interpreting all of the stains or the molecular or the special studies that you're ordering. Because you'll soon find yourself on the other side of fellowship being like, oh, now these are all mine. I have to sign this case now. Um, so I think that that's really important. And then just learning from each case. If you see an interesting lymphoma, reading about that type of lymphoma or a atypical presentation of GVHD, reviewing each sort of category as you're seeing them, I think is really helpful. Um, and we have about 7 minutes left. What sort of changes do we all see in the next 0 to 5 to 10, even beyond that years? There have been a couple questions in the chat about sort of how the job market looks after fellowship, so we could touch on that, or how AI is affecting our jobs, or the job market thus far.
Well, I have to say, graduating fellows have had any problems finding a job?
I did not have a problem finding a job. I ended up at the same place, but there were plenty of places that were looking. I think your first job may not be like the exact job that you want, 10, 20 years down the line. But there's a lot of opportunity, I feel. And I didn't struggle to find a place that would hire me.
I think there are a lot of opportunities all across the board, academic, private practice, whatever is your plan. And I think that even with the digital pathology and AI coming in, I feel I think it would be more flexible and it would be more assistive rather than anything else. And I think one thing that definitely it's already been there, but it's good to keep in mind that uh, our derm path exam is also digital nowadays, so you'll have more exposure to digital path during your fellowship as well. But I don't think it's there to replace you. It's more of an assistive, and I think it makes life easier.
I mean, the other thing about the AI and digital pathology is that remember that we're lifelong learners. So be ready to uh, kind of embrace the change. You might go to a fellowship program that already has embraced that change, and they already kind of will train you on using these tools. You might go to a program that still does not use it, but be ready to kind of move on to another place that will use it, and you'll need to acquire new skills and learn all these things. So it's a journey. Enjoy it. I think we should not be threatened by what the technology around us. Just kind of we might probably need to work on the type of skills that we need to develop and the level of complexity of cases that we need to work with. But it should be all there to help us be more efficient and better doctors.
I completely agree. I think there has been a huge switch to or movement towards digital pathology, but certainly not all centers or practices are there, and many people still are reading on glass. But making that transition either from your residency to your fellowship or your fellowship to your job, I don't think is difficult. Honestly, it comes very quickly, and as Dr. Modi was saying, the test is digital, so we all become and teach our fellows in that method to prepare them. And in terms of AI, I agree. I think that it is assistive in pathology at this point and can help us sort of predict. Hopefully, there will be an application that will help me find mitoses in melanocytic lesions. But it's never going to be able to sign out a melanoma for me, or it's not going to in my job um, trajectory. And I don't think so in the current attendees of this webinar in that job timeline. Um, so those are my thoughts. Agree. I feel like I shouldn't be threatened. I admit that I do feel threatened by AI just because there's so much news and forward movement in AI. But I think once you sort of sit down and think about how it integrates with our jobs, um, I think as patients and colleagues, we're always going to want a human on the other side of that diagnosis. So I think for right now, it is more of an assistive role. In the last 2 minutes, any other sort of highlight or like gold recommendations you would give to our applicants? There's no secret. It's just sort of presenting yourself as a candidate that's sort of well-rounded, has participated in research, has experience sitting at the scope with someone, and has this story, as Dr. Burkemper was referring to, sort of why DermPath makes sense for you, is what I would recommend to our applicants.
Were there any other Q&As that seemed like we should?
Yeah, I was trying to answer as we were going along, but there's a couple in there that I guess we didn't talk about the match too much. I know that the residents are, as for getting in residency, may be familiar with the match, but I think there's some comments of whether it would be a disadvantage or for either pathology residents or derm residents. So if anybody wanted to comment on their thoughts about that.
About whether the match would have negative effects.
Yeah. Is the match?
I mean, I think the match is designed to be as fair as possible to applicants. So, personally, for applicants, I don't see a downside. I do think that if you are at a residency that has a dermatopathology fellowship program and you're interested in staying there, there are some nuances related to participating in the match. I think you need to meet with the program director of your dermatopathology fellowship, like now, as soon as possible, to kind of talk with them about how they plan to um, navigate the match if they're participating in that, and, how you can show your interest in the program, without doing, match violations and things like that. So, I think this is a learning process, but at the end of the day, the match is meant to be very much applicant friendly and get you to the best program possible and the one that you want to be at. So, I don't know if anybody else on the webinar can think of a negative impact on an applicant aside from that nuanced of the internal applicant situation, which at the end of the day, I don't think it's a negative. It's just something that you would have to have an honest discussion with your the Derm Path Fellowship director.
I guess just in line with that, I did answer someone's question about holding positions for for programs that are not participating in the match, if they could still become part of, they could still go through the match. And the match is, just like residency, a binding contract. So that would be something, if you were going to hold a position, that position you should probably discuss with that program director, that you are still going through the match, because it would be a binding contract with the match.
Absolutely. That's a good comment. But yeah, the dermatopathology, and actually no specialty, can require all the programs to do the match. Most of them choose to do it because it's similar to the fellowships cast. If you don't do it, then you're an outlier and you may not get the types of applicants that you want because they're choosing to go through the match process. But there will be some programs not going through the match this year, and they will be taking their positions outside of the match. Some programs also have like two positions, and they can choose to put one into the match and one not into the match. I think there are some programs doing that because they do have some internal candidates that they want to kind of have one of those spots for their internal applicant. So when you're required to do all of your positions in the match, that's called the all-in policy. That is very common in residencies. We are not an all-in specialty in dermatopathology at this point. So that is completely legal. It's not a match violation to have one in the match and one not. So just make sure, check websites of programs you're interested in, just so you understand what positions there are and what you're applying to.
So I just want to thank everyone and all of our panelists for participating, and I hope that the attendees have gained some wisdom and information about their future journeys as hopeful DermPath fellows. This will be posted on the ASDP website in just a couple of days, and so if you need to refer back to it, that will be posted. And as we mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, the best place to find up-to-date information is the asdp.org website, and then under the fellowships tab. So thank you all and have a good evening.
Thanks, Emma and Trisha, for organizing this. It was
Thank you,
wonderful.
guys.
Thank you all
Thank
for
you. It was
coming.
great.